Hi, everyone. We're going to give the audience just a minute to join before we get started. All right, I think we can get going and more folks will be joining as I give the introduction. So good day or good evening to all of you, wherever you're located. Thank you so much for joining us today for a webinar on China's military aid to Myanmar's junta and the impact it's having on the ongoing conflict in Myanmar. I'm Pam Kennedy, a research analyst with Stimson's East Asia program, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Zachary Abuza, a professor at the National War College here in Washington, D.C., and Nyein Nyein Thant Aung, a recent graduate of the Erasmus Mundus Master's Program at the University of Glasgow in Ireland. Zach and Nyein Nyein recently published a detailed analysis of China's support for Myanmar's military government, the State Administrative Council, and they took a close look at the types of material support China has provided, especially weaponry, airplanes, and drones. But they also wrote about why China is doubling down despite the junta losing ground in the country. So I thought today we'll discuss how China has been supporting the junta, what China's interests are, and how this military support in particular has affected the battlefield situation in Myanmar. Has China's support helped the junta, and how far is China willing to go on behalf of the military government? How have the introduction of drones to the conflict changed the situation on the ground? We're going to put a link to the issue brief they wrote in the Zoom chat for your further reading. And if you'd like to ask a question at any time, please send in questions through the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll take those questions in the second half of the hour. So to start us off, Zach, could you give us an overview of how, and most importantly, why China has been providing this support to the junta in Myanmar?
Yes, thanks for having me. Let me just start with the fact that this is an unwinnable war for the junta. They are simply spread too thin across too many distinct battlefields. They are unable to engage in their traditional divide and conquer strategy of war fighting. And as such, the Chinese have gotten very nervous that they are going to lose the war. Now, I've never subscribed to the idea that China supported the coup. They got along well with Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD government. The Chinese are pretty agnostic about regime type. What they care about is threefold: competence, predictability, and protecting Chinese interests. And Min Aung Hlaing can do none of those. For the first 2 years, the Chinese were pretty much hedging their bets. But since then, they've really doubled down on the junta. They don't like them. They do not think they're competent, but they believe that they are best suited to protect China's economic interests. And they've certainly extracted greater concessions on the China-Myanmar economic corridor and other programs. Um, the Chinese are certainly looking for a political off-ramp for the generals. They do believe that the military should have representation in a future post SAC government. Um, I think it's important to understand that the Chinese, being this very unitary, centralized state, have a very hard time conceptualizing uh, a federal democracy on their border, especially a messy federal democracy, because no one believes that the post-coup transition is going to be seamless. The Chinese really fear a long-running civil war and chronic instability on their borders. So the military and diplomatic assistance that they provide right now is simply laying the groundwork for a political resolution that they want to see, some sort of power sharing agreement in which the military retains a very strong voice. Now, we've seen the Chinese engage in a number of diplomatic activities. After holding the SAC at arm's length for several years, we saw So Win and Min Klang both visit China. This was the legitimacy the SAC had been craving. When Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, traveled to Naypyidaw, he pledged significant amounts in assistance and aid and support for elections. And the Chinese have certainly put tremendous pressure on the different ethnic resistance organizations along their border. The Kachin Independence Army, the Tang National Liberation Army, the Myanmar National Defense Democratic Alliance Army. The Chinese have been really, really tough, shutting down border trade, which has devastated the local economies. They've shut off electricity and internets into those communities. The Chinese have played hardball. The Chinese have abducted Peng De-ren of the MNDA. He's been treated for medical ailments he did not know he had. And the Chinese are simply willing to extend the long arm of Chinese law into Myanmar to force those different groups to make concessions. Now, I would still say that they have agency and they have pushed back, when they have all reached multiple ceasefires with the junta, and every time the junta violates it, which they invariably do, they have agency and they will go back to war. But I have to say that I certainly called what happened in Lashio wrong. I thought the MNDAA would never give it up. They were simply waiting out the junta that just did not have the manpower to retake the city. And, the military has taken it back with the Chinese in tow, and that is really troubling. Another thing the Chinese have done is they've set up these joint security corporations. And what that has allowed for the junta to simply divert very needed manpower away from static defenses of Chinese economic interests, whether it's copper mines or the Chokpyu port. That has freed up troops. But I think we have to understand that when the Chinese go in, there's a very thin line between Chinese private military corporations and the PLA, and that they are going to be able to provide significant amounts of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, as well as targeting data for the junta. The military assistance has been very important. The United Nations found that in the 2 years after the coup, some 41 Chinese weapons suppliers sold around $267 million in arms. That has increased in the 2 years since. And the equipment is really important that they have sent. The most important of this has probably been spare parts for a range of Chinese-built jets. We have to understand that these jet fighters just require constant maintenance and support. But the Chinese have also sold Mi-2 helicopters, and this is so important because that lift capacity is what allows the junta to go out to various parts, remote parts of the country and resupply units. We in the West always forget that the Myanmar military treated this country as a country under occupation with tens of thousands of remote posts all over the country that have to be resupplied. And since Operation 1027 began, there have been all of these surrenders of troops. And it's not that they've lost faith or support the democratic movement. A lot of them just say, threw in the towel because they had gone so long without resupply of food, ammunition, water, medical evacuations, or reinforcements. And so that heavy lift helicopter supply, China is simply keeping up with the losses of the SAC's helicopter forces. Um, Maybe arguably the most important thing, a kinetic weapon that the Chinese have delivered have been these FTC 2000 jet trainers. Now, they're not nearly as sophisticated as the four Su-30s that the Myanmar military has taken possession from Russia, but they are much cheaper to run. And against an insurgency, and frankly, let's be honest, they use them mostly against civilian targets. They're completely sufficient for that. And it's that, dozen of those FTC 2000s, along with the Russian Yak 130s, that are probably doing the lion's share of the combat operations. And this is a military that does not have sufficient troops on the ground. They are overly reliant on air power. There in 2024, the average in a month was around 300 airstrikes a month. In the final months of 2024, that increased. In March 2025, we saw some 92 airstrikes. There were over 200 airstrikes in the 3 weeks after the earthquake. This is astounding, and that's under international pressure. So you really get a sense of how important air power is for the junta, and the Chinese are the key suppliers of spare parts and the airframes themselves. And let me just conclude with one last point. While we like to focus on weapons imports, we often forget about the munitions. Everything from the ammunition for automatic rifles to mortar rounds to the newly fashioned drone rounds to the 500-pound gravity bombs that these planes are dropping are made indigenously in Kepasa factories, defense industry factories in Myanmar. And we know there's been significant amounts of Chinese technical assistance to keep those munition lines running. So air support is just absolutely key for the junta. They are spread too thin across too many fronts. They can conscript 5,000 men a month, but they're simply deployed without any training in a matter of days. They're really cannon fodder. And I think we saw that dire shortage of manpower with the earthquake and the fact that the military was AWOL. They were not present for any of the emergency relief and reconstruction except in Naypyidaw. And that's simply they didn't have the manpower and they were unwilling to pull forces back from frontlines troops. And that just is going to make air power even more important. But the last piece that the Chinese have done is help supply up down to the tactical level drones. And that's what my brilliant colleague, Nyein Nyein Thant Aung, is going to talk about. And it's all based from her excellent master's thesis that she did on the PDF's use of drone technology. But in the course of her interviews, she was speaking to the PDFs and the EROs who acknowledged that it took the junta a while, but drones are very much part of their arsenal now, and they might not be able to change the course of the war, but they are certainly having an impact.
Thank you so much, Zach, for painting that grim picture of how China's support has enabled the junta to continue this really lopsided sort of battlefield strategy, overly reliant on air power, not enough boots on the ground to maintain its territory, and what seems like a battle that should have already been lost. And Nyein Nyein, we're so glad to have you here to tell us more about the unmanned aerial vehicles that have been begun to be used over the past 12 to 18 months in Myanmar. Could you tell us more about those systems and the kinds of impacts you're seeing them have on the conflict?
Thanks, Ben, and thank you for having me today along with Zach. And thanks, Zach, for introducing this part of my thesis finding. So regarding the drones, the use of drones in Myanmar conflict, we can see I would say that is the evolution of the drones in Myanmar conflict in three stages. The first one is the use of drone by Hunter, studying reportedly found in around 2015 and 2018 for the reconnaissance purposes, for ISR purposes. And after the military coup in 2021, the resistant forces trying to adopt this drone as their tactical their tactics to deploy on the battlefields. But they started with the same with Hunter. They started with the ISR purposes first. So we have seen from the mid 2021 to end of 2021, so resistant forces use this commercial like use for the photography and also for the aerial view, and also those mini drones used in the agriculture. They deploy on the battlefield for their reconnaissance purposes. So it's from like by the end of mid 2021 to end of 2021. And we status observe the deployment of drone as a class as a munition purposes is starting from the start of 2022, and it's like kind of second stage. So second stage is like I would say it's a significant shift in the drone deployment from the resistant forces side. So the introduction of attack drone is not used for this surveillance, but also for carrying out the strikes. So they use the drone for the munition purposes. So, but these were typically modifying commercial drones. So the timeline is from the end of early 2022 to onward is the use of commercial drones equipped with small explosive device or grenade. So these drones were used by resistant groups to attack counter forces, confines, and also checkpoint, and also the camps, often with the strategic precision. But these are like kind of mini in-house, not yet to the mini in-house predation. And the third stage is starting from mid-2022. There is a notable move toward domestic and localized innovation. Also, ERO and also resistant forces started assembling drones using commercially available parts, improving both range and payload. So by 2023 and 2024, drone warfare had become a normalized part of the conflict dynamics in Myanmar. And SAC forces themselves began enhancing using and deploying drone capability, potentially with the external support, including from Chinese entity and the dual tech transfer. So this third stage marks a critical turning point. Drone usage is no longer just a tactical supplement. It's also shaping battlefield strategy for both sides. So the availability of blueprints and tutorial online combined with local knowledge sharing has also led to a sort of drone proliferation among the resistant forces and also the counter forces. So the increase of use of drone has disputed the traditional warfare logic, especially in Myanmar context. So it has democratized lethality, allow resistant groups to compensate for their lack of heavy weaponry and enable them to carry out asymmetric attack. So, but at the same time, it has also raised new challenges in terms of counter-drone measure. Because as Zach also mentioned about the counter-drone measure by the military. So this current stage is like countering counter-drone and countering counter-drone is like kind of cycle things at this moment of Myanmar conflict dynamic. And also there are also questions regarding civilian safety and legal ethical concern, particularly when drone strike occur near the populated areas. So these cases can be seen when the military, when the hunter deploys their drone. Regarding here, I would like to add that one thing about the China's support on the use of drone in Myanmar is, I would say, double-edged sword for from China, because China is not only supporting military to military assistance, but also they've been using this dual technology and item transfer. So Myanmar and the other high-level SAC leaders, SAC personnel, visited China, and also they visited the academic institution to learn drone technology. So it's like not only the military technology transfer, but also this dual civilian technology transfer also happening at the same time. So this is like kind of discussion of like this potential technology, not only the potential technology transfer, but also the other wider and beyond I would say this further implication in the future. So this double-edged sword from China, so it's like kind of raising this ethical and legal concern, because by the end of 2024, Beijing has released the dual regulation on dual item transfer, but it's covered worldwide. But the legal concern when it came to Myanmar conflict is the issues of China regulation on dual items, because this Beijing's regulatory framework on this item seems to conflict with China action in Myanmar. The junta has reportedly asked Beijing to manage drone export more strictly, especially along the border areas. But companies in Myanmar, including Semlink to the junta, stay involved in purchasing drone from Chinese manufacturer. So it's also raising question about whether these regulations are being enforced effectively. So to short, China's support to Myanmar regarding drones can be seen as a delicate balancing act, helping Myanmar's military capability while navigating this complexity of dual use technology and the potential scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyein Nyein. That is it's really fascinating to see how in such a short amount of time since the beginning of the coup, the role of drones has moved swiftly from surveillance, reconnaissance, to totally changing the approach of these armed actors to the battles. And China's role is also, as you point out, particularly interesting because the drones do amplify the ability of the smaller, less resourced armed resistance groups to play a larger role in defending their territory, or expanding their territory. But at the same time, the junta has such an in with China that it is able to try to get China to control exports of the drones to these groups. It's a really fascinating tangle of issues there. Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting discussion. I will start with a question for you, Nyein Nyein. How do you anticipate the conflicts in Myanmar evolving over the next year? You've discussed you've seen in your research about 3 phases of the use of drones. Do you anticipate there being a further evolution, or is it going to remain on a similar trajectory?
It's as I mentioned earlier, so this drone is not the sole strategic implication from the resistance forces. So they also use like mines and cluster munition before for their target, and also later they use drone, and also they also have their in-house production, although which is whatever people say is an infant level or something, but they do have in-house production already. So I anticipate that there will be the resistance forces, because led by youth, so they will be looking for another tactical, I would say, weapon system. It's not a big word, but like I would say weapon system for that they can deploy and apply tactically and also cost effectiveness in the long run. So I'm anticipate there will be another like recreated advanced military technology for non-state actor will be seen in the future. I think I'm muted.
Sorry, all this far into using Zoom, and I'm still muting myself. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Zach, do you have anything to add on your perspective on how the conflict will evolve over the next few months, year?
Well, one thing I want people to pay attention to is that there are actually some very new battlefronts emerging right now. The Arakan army has almost completed their capture of Rakhine State, with the exception of Sittwe. They have not taken over the Chinese Special Economic Zone in Chokfu, but they're now pushing in to Magwe, they're pushing into Bago, and they're pushing into Irrawaddy. And in all 3 of those cases, they're working with local PDFs. We are now seeing a lot more PDFs starting to work together in Tanantiri and places in the south that had not seen as much violence as the rest. So this is really important. These are new fronts that the junta just had not had to fight in the past. We're seeing, if you kind of look at the location of those 300 air attacks since the earthquake. The focus right now is in southern Sagaing, it's in Magwe and Mandalay. It's in the Bama heartland, and the military is determined to try to retake and eliminate all opposition in the Bama heartland. They've, never in 70 years of fighting had to worry about their supply lines going through being vulnerable in the Bama heartland. They always fought in the ethnic regions, but never there. So you're going to see a lot more fighting in that heartland, the dry zone area. And again, that's spreading the military very thin. Should the opposition start to be able to target some of those defense industry factories in Bago, Magwe, Mandalay, and really start to target the regime's ability to wage war, it's going to be a very different front. And finally, we've seen kind of not surprising, but after the success of Operation 1027, but the MNDAA, the KIA, TNLA have under Chinese pressure not been as active in their offensives right now, but I imagine after a period of recouping, resupplying, resting troops, that you will see a new phase in their offensive. You now have PDF troops patrolling the Yangon-Naypyidaw highway. So the ability to kind of cut off key transit corridors is really important. And, over half of the transit corridors in the country are no longer passable.
Those are all excellent points, and the earthquake has really complicated factors a lot. It the junta, as you mentioned, has very limited capacity to do recovery and reconstruction efforts since it's fighting this multi-front war. And there was a ceasefire that was almost immediately broken and was essentially not a ceasefire. And so the war is raging on while there are still numerous areas around from the Mandalay down to Naypyidaw corridor that need a lot of humanitarian assistance. How do you see the earthquake impacting the support China gives to the junta? Will we see more humanitarian assistance, or is China's best option at this point to just continue as it has been going with the military support? Maybe Zach first, and then I'll go to Nyein
Yeah,
Nyein,
maybe
or
sex.
okay.
Okay. Look, the despite the fact that the population is very superstitious and always looking for omens, and this is a very clear sign that the military has no mandate of heaven. In many ways, the earthquake has been a godsend for the junta. Min Aung Hlaing traveled to Thailand twice in 2 weeks. It has given him the legitimacy he has craved. It has allowed the international community to engage of what was a very isolated junta on the ropes. Unfortunately, the UN system continues to engage the military authorities and who restrict the provision of aid to the ethnic resistance organizations or other territories beyond their control, which, let's be honest, is well over 55% of the country. So we should not be surprised. This is a regime that has a long history of weaponizing aid and punishing communities. The people of Myanmar are the furthest thing on the minds of the generals in their cocoon in Naypyidaw.
Here I want to add one issue is that China is on the other way, they've been trying to influence the legislative and legal system of Myanmar. So as you have seen that this entering of private security companies in Myanmar has been initiated through this legal structure first. And also according to my observation, the China ambassador to Myanmar had met with Myanmar's attorney general for like a frequent before the earthquake. So they've been discussed. And also before that, before this ambassador taking office, this high-level official from Chinese embassy in Myanmar have met with this legal structure things, also legal profession in Myanmar, like how to navigate these things. So what I want to mention is there will be more discussion between this Chinese embassy and also this legal things will be seen more often even if this adequate relief and this humanitarian aid while carrying it out, and also it will be like more frequent for various purposes. So it might be include this private for the security companies, but also for this scam centers in Myanmar, and also maybe for this another topics and issues regarding this conflict dynamics in Myanmar.
Thank you. And I'll start taking questions from the audience now. We already have a number coming in. I think we have some really interesting ones from Lex Riefel about the use of the drones and technology. So the two-part question, is there any evidence that the opposition groups are getting any technology support from sources in India, which has been very active along Myanmar's western border? And do you know anything about the use of drones by the Arakan army?
I will start with the second question. So the use of drone by the Arakan army is according to my observation and this continuous observing, they use this drone for the reconnaissance purposes, but the use for the munition things is not publicly reported. So I want to say I've seen that. So it's like, but they use for the reconnaissance purposes. So I've been seeing this from the public, their announced. Their media and also this photo and this media online can be seen their use of drone, like the small drone, not for the attack drone. And for the first question, the technology transfer from India, for that question I would say it's a bit vague to say that this India government is supporting, because with this nature of technology transfer between non-state actor, with this nature, so there will be transfer between non-state actors across the border from both sides, but not from this government support.
That's an excellent point. India has been very cautious about how it approaches Myanmar, and the local authorities in Mizoram state and I guess individual organizations would be a lot more likely to have dealings with the EAOs along Myanmar's border. Thank you. That was really interesting. We are, of course, looking towards potentially the junta trying to hold elections in December of this year, maybe. They've postponed them several times, so to be continued. But Hunter Marston has a really excellent question, because this is an area that Beijing feels very strongly about. Its pledged support for the elections if the junta can pull them off. And Zach, what sort of government or coalition would Beijing like to see in power whenever elections are held?
Yeah, Hunter, really important question. I think the Chinese are fairly agnostic about that. I think they would want some sort of broad-based coalition that has significant military representation. The Chinese do believe that only the military can hold the country together. They've never viewed the military as the cause of the country's instability. But I think the Chinese would like to see some degree of legitimacy. But I just, you know better than I do that how in hell could they make any sort of election legitimate? Right now, they are, the military, when they did their census, could only do it in what, 160 something of the 330 townships, fewer than 50, though they do control about 2/3 of the population. One of the things that came out in a Stimson workshop last week with a great bunch of young scholars is we were kind of thinking through about how the military would push through kind of a phased type of elections where it's held in areas they control and other parts to be determined, with simply the hopes that that would be good enough for the international community, and in particular, China, India, Thailand on their borders, and maybe other ASEAN states. But again, the Chinese are simply looking for something that will end this chronic instability that will allow them to continue to be able to leverage their influence and expand their economic interests.
Thank you. Nyein Nyein, do you have anything you'd like to add?
This electoral thing is not on my area scope, but we've seen this from my areas of interest. This like before this electoral things, there will be impact on this in-house production because of the Chinese regulation. So I think it would be also effective to the in-house production of the resistant forces, especially on this logistical transfer and the technological transfer thing. So I've been following up on this thing, so this area to follow up.
Thank you. And I do have a question that touches on your area of expertise in drones and China's influence. So we had a really important comment from Ko Salzman about how the resistance groups are using these smaller, low-quality drones, and then the military has better access, thanks to China, to these larger drones capable of carrying munitions. But we also have from Nick Kong this interesting question about, can the resistance form some sort of unified front against China? Since the Northern EAOs obviously have a lot of experience dealing with China individually. They're used to kind of working out smaller deals with China because they have a lot of cross-border trade. And so my thought combining these two topics is there room for the Northern EAOs to cooperate on getting better drone technology, or is it that China's influence is so successful in maintaining wedges between these groups that there isn't room for them to cooperate in some of their technology access issues?
So in the Operation 1027 Phase 1, the first one, we seen the use of drone from the Northern Alliance, from this brotherhood. Three brotherhoods is like they use this swarm of drone. It's like kind of not only with the cluster munition from one drone, they use a lot of drone in the like kind of swarming things, like kind of you can see the birds flying in the sunset, or this kind of thing happen in 1027. I would say that's the largest and also significant event regarding the use of drone in Myanmar conflict. So that couldn't be happen without the support and technological transfer from an external actors. So this but when it comes to the resistant forces, they like I would say they're diverse in the way they use and they deploy. So there are three significant areas of the resistant forces, especially PDF. So we can observe three different dynamics. So it's in the eastern area, and also in the southern area is a different. We can see a different strategy, and also the use of deployment of technology, and also a different one in Karenni State and a different one in Heartland area in this Burman dominated area, especially in Sakai and Makwe region. So this current scenario is like kind of they have a different thing. So the problem is without this coordinated effort and this transfer from because I'm saying this because this PDF learning from the open sources only as of my writing thesis in mid 2024. So they're like kind of self-learning paces and using this drone. So this like kind of technophile youth using this thing and recreating these things. So we'll see like different strategies and tactics based on this geographic location. So connecting with the 1027, it would be better for the resistance forces to have the coordinated effort in terms of technological transfer. But I'm not saying that they don't have it. They do have it between each other, among these PDF forces. But the thing is, it would be better for them to have this better coordinated and greater coordinated effort.
Can I add something? Let me just reiterate a point that Nyein Nyein is making. So much of what the PDFs and EROs have done is retrofit off-the-shelf commercial grade drones. The military has been able to do that too, but they've had this important introduction of military grade drones. So suicide or kamikaze drones that are designed specifically. They've really been trying to push not just the Chinese, but also in recent trips to Russia to purchase loitering munitions. Now, the Russians are short on those, and we haven't seen the export of loitering munitions to Myanmar yet, as far as I know. But, you know, the Russians have definitely been able, along with the Chinese, to sell prototypes and license production of some of these more advanced kamikaze drones that the military is able to produce in their factories. And, you know, those are just very different beasts than these retrofitted drones that are dropping, you know, by gravity mortar rounds.
Thank you. That is really helpful context. It really is a very complex situation for these armed groups, for the smaller resistance groups in particular, to get a hold of these kinds of technologies. We do have a question from Thomas Lee digging a little further into that. He asks, how do you view the role of the United Wa State Army in through its ties with China and these weapons sales? Nyein Nyein, have you seen evidence that UWSA is providing drones? Is that an area that they are involved in or maybe expanding into?
It's like not as a how can I say formal transfer, but they have this like kind of informal transfer and engagement. So that is also, we have like kind of, it's the open sources information, so we can see that. But for the specific drones, regarding the drones, I would say they do have a tech transfer, not as a military grade drone, but like transfer of how to navigate this, how to do the navigation function and how to do the precise munition, and also some not as a physical training, but also like this, not as a physical training, but like kind of virtual training also we could observe from this open sources, like kind of transfer from them.
Thank you. So Zach mentioned in his discussion that there are Chinese companies that have the Chinese military, private military companies or private security companies that are active in Myanmar, and China and the junta last year signed an agreement to form a joint security company. And Mike Mitchell is asking whether this constitutes a Chinese occupation of Burma, especially with Chinese monitors now in Lashio. Zach, do you think that China has any interest in maintaining a larger military presence in Myanmar to protect its interests, or is it really hoping that the junta can get back on its feet sufficiently to do that?
Yeah, China actually doesn't have a lot of experience or interest in expeditionary warfare. That said, Myanmar is on their border, and the Chinese care far more about the what is immediately on their border than other parts of the world. So I'm not surprised we've seen the Chinese deploy private security corporations, private military corporations out there, and then send in a pretty robust team into Lashio with Deng Lixun. Um, my guess is the Chinese would like to maintain a smallish footprint there, uh, while they want to maintain influence. I think it still stands that their primary goal is to stop the hemorrhaging on the part of the junta so that they can hold elections by year end and there can be some sort of good enough political solution in the Chinese eyes. I mean, I personally don't think that would ever be legitimate or stop the bloodshed. Um, but I think that's what the Chinese are aiming for. They know the junta just cannot win this war, so they have to do everything they can to make sure they don't lose it.
Thank you. Nyein Nyein, do you have any thoughts to add on that point?
Thoughts to add about this private security companies deployment is I'm presumably I'm anticipating there will be like more in terms of civilian transfer of this drone and other dual item transfer would be carried out through this private security companies channel.
Thank you. We have a good question from Priscilla Clapp about how the earthquake has affected the junta's warfighting capability. And her main point is it too early to tell? And so what I want to ask you is how long of a window are we looking at before we see how the earthquake has really affected the balance of power on the battlefield? Is it going to cripple the junta in the long run, or will China be able to sufficiently prop it up? Zach, would
Right.
you like to take a stab?
Well, it certainly hasn't stopped their air campaign. Again, 300 airstrikes since the earthquake, and despite international condemnation of this, they're just impervious to international criticism. Um, Again, I think one of the reasons the military has been so AWOL in terms of the rehabilitation efforts is that they have been spread too thin and they are just terrified of withdrawing troops from frontline positions to engage in necessary reconstruction or at the initial phases, life saving. Um, and I think the military has every intention of keeping troops in place. And again, we look at where the heaviest fighting in the past couple months has been. It's been in the dry zone. They have to, from a military perspective, the military feels, the SAC feels, they have to pacify the dry region, dry zone, because, you know, if they cannot secure their logistics lines through Sagaing, Magwe, northern Mandalay, it's going to be very hard for them to ever go back on the offensive in Kachin or northern Shan states.
David Timberman also asks about forced conscription and defections. Has the earthquake impacted that situation? And for Nyein Nyein, on the back of that question, can the use of drones help the junta, I guess, need fewer people? Can they sort of automate some of their attacks on the resistance groups and the civilian populations? What sort of impact do you think that will have ultimately?
You mean like after this earthquake?
Yes, like in the wake of the earthquake, which really showed, as you both have explained, like how strapped for manpower the junta is, and how it employs air power in order to extend its reach further without being able to back that up with ground troops.
So it's like a funny but a sad fact for the people, because funny information is, as we all know, military junta SAC had carried out this sunset, the so-called sunset data collection, but this act had been almost a month, but they couldn't release the number of death tolls, the exact numbers of death tolls or injuries or the others losses. They couldn't, because although they said they had censored, but they couldn't use their data at all. So that's the like kind of technically is like they have this kind of defection, but the thing is they don't carry out this conscription recruitment according to the systematically to the census. So it also depends on the local administrator. So I think like if they force the local administrator to carry out this recruitment thing, it would be like the same or maybe like similar to the same recruitment that they had before the earthquake. So it's like the manpower would be like kind of I don't assume there will be like kind of like a major or significant difference regarding that. For the what was the question about the drones again?
My question about the drones is, like we've seen other militaries around the world try to use unmanned systems to go where people can't go as safely, but also just to replace manpower, like Japan with an aging and declining population. And in Myanmar, now there's these drones that have a lot of capabilities in reconnaissance and also attack. Could the junta use them to sort of perpetuate its war, even as conscripts dodge conscription and people defect?
So based this like kind of news reporting, this journalist reporting I'm seeing in they stay deploying drones, SAC, Hunter stay deploying drones to purposely, mostly for the reconnaissance, but also they used this lottery munition also. But mostly we can see in this western part of the area, like western part of the country. In Rakhine, we saw this Hunter use of drone, the kamikaze, and also in this like Sakai and Magui region, they stay using that. Even after the earthquake.
Thank you. Zach, do you want to add anything on the conscription defection issue?
Yeah. I haven't seen any reporting from, the NGOs that deal with defections or publicize it. I haven't seen an uptick in this. One thing, there's still surprisingly has not been a lot in the way of unit level defections. It's still individuals, which is surprising to me. It certainly goes against what I would have predicted. But one thing that we never really know in Myanmar is the amount of desertions, and people simply disappearing from front lines and heading back to the villages. I imagine those numbers are higher than we would think. Great reporting for the past few years that I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with from Yemo Koye has found repeatedly that there's not a unit in the country that is even close to the legal floor of manpower. So they've just always had trouble sustaining their troops. Can technology help that? Pam's question. Look, the drones have given the military new life. They've been able to slow the offensives. The military-grade drones have night vision capabilities, something the PDFs and EROs do not have. And that just allows the military to slog on despite their losses, despite the fact that they have no legitimacy, despite the fact that they're spread very thin and logistically. This is a war that they cannot sustain. The technology just gives them a little bit more staying power. I still think they cannot win. You can use air power, but you cannot hold territory from the air. At the end of the day, you need boots on the ground.
Thank you, Zach. So we are just about out of time. If we can stretch this for just 2 minutes, I will ask the one last question that I think is the topic we haven't touched yet, from Thetarm Nyayisan. She asks, as China deepens its influence through military and political support to the junta, the US, meanwhile, has retreated from aid and diplomacy. How is that going to affect the situation on the ground? We already saw in the earthquake, of course, the obvious humanitarian effect, the lack of humanitarian aid coming from the US. So my question to you is, what role do you think that the US could play now? And if not from the government, from NGOs, from civil society groups? There's a large Burma diaspora in the US. What role do you envision going forward for the US at present?
Nyein Nyein, I'm going to let you take that, just given my position.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's not my areas of observing, but regarding this diplomatic engagement, because like when we compare with this, like what financial amount that as in the names of humanitarian aid that China has been already given. China is the #1 of the aid provider at this moment for the equity. So but now at the ground level, like it's the same individual people are saying that how people are criticizing and questioning that how these humanitarian aid would be delivered to the public directly. So like in that space, I think the US, not only the US, but also the Western government can enter that space to hold the accountability from the related, like kind of related stakeholder from that space to hold the accountability. Okay, if the military is corrupt, if the SAC and hunters is corrupted, so they could not enable to perform this humanitarian relief for the people, then we can enter with this maybe responsibility to assist from that space. So that's what I've been thinking lately in this day.
Thank you so much for that, Nyein Nyein. And so we've covered a lot of ground. There's still so much more to discuss with China, Myanmar, the battlefield situation. We're out of time. Thank you so much to the audience for sending in great questions and comments. It was a really lively discussion. And Zach, Nyein Nyein, thank you so much for joining us to discuss your research. This is really shedding an important light on China's continuing engagement with the junta and the development of the use of drones on the battlefield. So thank you so much.